My name's Scott Trent, and I'm an artist. I'm not sure what this means. My 2-year-old son is an artist, and we hang his art on the refrigerator. In my case, it simply means I rarely get paid for my work, I have a hard time paying my bills, and I have another job to support my art career. In 2012, I tried an experiment which would later explain a lot about creativity to me. It was the year that I realized that creativity and coyotes have a lot in common and showed me how much both require a courageous effort to feed. I want to tell you what I discovered and how it gave me insight into creativity, the artist's struggle, and what's required to be an artist. I call this the year I fed the coyotes. Before I share that story with you, I'd like to share a few experiences which have led up to that year and my insights. I was 40 years old the first time I publicly proclaimed to be an artist. This might seem odd to think, what's the big deal about saying you're an artist? But I remember it was huge. It was a speech class at UTD, and we were tasked to introduce ourselves to the class and tell one interesting thing about ourselves. I couldn't believe how monumental this simple test felt as I proclaimed, "Hi, I'm Scott and I'm an artist." It felt as if I was bragging or committing some type of obligation. I felt as though someone would shout out, "Prove it," and want me to show them this great art to make it where I could claim being an artist. It truly surprised me how that statement impacted me and the power of such an admission. A few years later, as I neared the end of my academic career at UTD, I had another experience that was equally eye-opening. Over the years, I had developed a quirky habit of taking pictures of audiences in which I speak in front of. It began by accident when I captured this image of an interview for a teaching position for a photography class. Say cheese as I take a picture of the audience. I don't know if it's obvious, but I didn't get this job. I guarantee you that man on the left right there, he's making his grocery list, doesn't have a clue what I'm saying. Then, as a glutton for punishment, I often take a picture of the class in which I'm teaching each semester. Look how bored these students look. You think I need to work on my presentation skills, maybe? I'd finally reached the end of my academic career. I was defending my dissertation to the committee, and of course, I wanted to take a picture of maybe the most important audience I would ever stand in front of. I mean, before today, of course. I couldn't do it. These 5 men were the smartest people I'd ever met as far as they were concerned, not excited about having to gather at the early hour of 9 a.m. and completely bored by this long paper that most didn't even read. They literally held my academic career in their hands, and none of them were smiling. Only a couple acknowledged me as they entered the room 5 minutes past our scheduled start time. I brought my camera and planned to take this picture, but found I could not take the picture. I couldn't get myself to take a chance and offend them, or even the smallest step outside of protocol and say, "Cheese, smile." It's one of my biggest regrets and most powerful reminder how much courage it takes to be creative. So I ask, why does the artist matter? As I explore creativity and spent the years thinking about this, I always get back to why the artists and what are they doing that's so important? In a recent project, I was lucky enough to work with my friend Pascal Pryor and the impressive community over in North Richland Hills called Hometown Community, where we placed, at this point, 4 works of art in their neighborhood. These orange barricades were placed around the art that Pascal placed. The top left-hand corner is this beautiful piece that she created. It's over 40 feet long. The butterflies stand up as tall as 8 feet in the air. You have 5 butterflies sitting on top of this huge metal purple ribbon that's flowing across the ground. And like I said, the day after it was installed, this orange barricade was placed around it. And as what the community leaders found was that children loved art and wanted to climb on it. And it was appalling to them that anyone would consider climbing on fine art, not to mention how dangerous it was. And of course, this reminded me and reiterated the idea how fine art is just one step away from being playground equipment. Around this time, We had just finished installing the fourth work of art in the neighborhood, and homeowners were starting to take note. A petition was signed to get rid of the art and repurpose the money that was in the art fund to expenses such as sidewalk repairs and installation of more security lights. They felt like the art fund was a misuse of money, and then on top of that, they didn't even like the art that was installed. There were two community meetings held, many weeks of extreme heated discussions on the community's social media site, and a signed petition of over 200 homeowners to fire the art board and get rid of the art. The president of the HOA was harshly disparaged and criticized with erroneous accusations and just mean personal attacks. Now, as an educator and an artist, I'm constantly exploring the value of art to society and seeking those win-win-win opportunities for the artist in the community and the business. Even with the special criticism that was reserved for me as the curator of the project, I was still excited by the passion and enthusiasm by both factions. Whether you were for or against art, it was an eruption and a community uprising which rarely happens. There was a robust dialogue taking place about art, the value of art, and the purpose of art for the stakeholders. The art tapped into something which is rarely stirred, and I'm still in awe of the power of art. In 2009, I founded the Henderson Art Project. The objective was to place fine art on public streets and find ways to engage the community in the art experience. I learned a lot from this experience. Maybe the biggest revelation was the challenge to find a common appreciation for the art, as well as finding the value for all stakeholders. There was a constant struggle, and I would say even collision, between the different interests represented on the street. It's a classic gap between the business and artist, as art does not always provide a tangible benefit such as monthly rent, which might bring in $50,000 a year for the store space. What does art provide? Henderson was not the first time I experienced this conversation. The struggle for fine art to coexist in the community. A few years later, I participated in an art exhibition within a high-end shopping center in Dallas area. I delivered the art, and a few days later, this is what I returned to. The organizer installed the art, and this was his solution to his concerns for safety and keeping customers a safe distance from the art. The image on the right shows my art with a wooden blocks sitting on top of the art, filled in with mulch, black mulch, I think it is. Left is the original art. I had two issues. First, that I wasn't even involved in the conversation on maybe what was the best way to safely secure the art. And secondly, that the fact was this was no longer my work of art. It's a new piece. Matter of fact, call it a collaboration, if you like, between me and the organizer. The organizer was completely oblivious to the fact that all decisions from creation to installation and presentation are interconnected. The art is not just an object created to look at. The creation of a work of art considers imagination, creation, intention, expectations, and then how all of this is received and interacted with. You cannot work with an artist and not have them involved in every aspect of the conversation. It reminds me and provides a perfect example of what can happen depending on who is involved in the conversation and who makes the final decisions. In every case, the outcome will be different depending on who is leading the conversation. One last example of the gap that often occurs between the artist and business. This was a commission piece which I did with Pascal Pryor and James Bauer and myself. We were tasked with creating a sign of the building address that was somehow creative. And after discussing the project with the client, I realized that the extent of creativity I was going to be able to sell was a slight tilt of the zero. That was it. We made it bold to be seen by cars passing by, large and bright red. We were pleased with finding that spot to satisfy all people in this creation. 1 week after we installed this work of art, I received a call from the client. And he explained to me that the financial partner with the group had complained that the sign looked broken and he wanted it fixed. Now, let me just say this. I'm on the clock here. My time is limited and I've got a lot to say, but this is important. I want you to take a moment and think about this. What is the partner thinking is the message that will be negatively reflected on the building? Like, what will people think when they see this sign? I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't give anything to this that, like, if someone saw a sign, they would stop and say, oh my gosh, that is the worst landlord ever. Look how damaged their sign is, and they don't even fix it. Needless to say, we fixed the art. A few years back, I was the artist in residence for the city of Frisco. I lived for 3 years in a house on 5,000 acres. It was just amazing. It was just me and my three pups, and of course my other friends. One of my dogs was suffering from allergies, and I was forced to restrict her diet. And of course, all three dogs ate out of the same bowl, so I had to change her food to a special hypoallergenic food, and then I had to change the other dog's food too. And this left me with a large bag of unused dog food. So I did what anyone else would do. I came to the conclusion that I needed to put the food out and feed the wildlife. And specifically, I wanted to feed the coyotes. I'd never seen them, but every night, just as the sun was setting and into the early evening, I could hear them just over the ridge, out in the darkness, yipping and howling at the moon. So I fed the coyotes. I found a spot just outside the fence, but visible from my office window, and I scattered food every day. Anyone I shared this idea with would explain that this was very foolish and even dangerous. The coyotes would eat the little dogs if I invited them on the property. There was no good in feeding the coyotes. Now, this always amused me somewhat because I quickly learned within weeks and months out there on that property that I was simply a guest on this property, as I would regularly find mice, snakes, and even a tarantula in the house. But even more poignant was the idea that ignoring the coyotes would somehow keep them off the property. I see this often as people who ignore the creative nature and deny having any similarities to an artist. See, I feel that creativity, similar to a fish who must swim to live, a person must create to live. For many, this might be picking out the perfect outfit, hairstyle, or creating the perfect meal for dinner. It doesn't matter. Creating is creating. I can remember the first time I saw her outside my window, almost like it was yesterday. She stood there hunched, just barely above the tall grass, yet her ears were alert, and she dropped eating. She stopped eating every few minutes to look around and check the surroundings. As weeks passed, more and more coyotes visited the house and ate. There were never more than two at a time, and they would come at all different times of the day. It got where I would see them in the field outside my studio. One early morning, I caught a glimpse of several younger coyotes jumping on bales of hay and chasing each other. Or I'd look out in the middle of an afternoon and see a solitary coyote lounging in the sun, her ears just above the swaying grass, nose to the wind, eyes squinted, just enjoying herself. At the time, I noted that I gained a new perspective, or awareness, where I could see the coyotes. Even as their fur provided a natural camouflage in the green and brown grass and shrubs surrounding the property, I noted in my creative process that I was much more prolific and inspired when I nurtured and fed my creativity. Eventually, the experiment had to stop. I was spending way too much money on large bags of dog food from Walmart. And almost instantly, when I quit putting the food out and the coyotes quit coming by, they disappeared altogether. I didn't see them anymore. I knew they were still there because I could hear them every night, but I didn't see them. I didn't see them lounging in the field or romping on the hay. I didn't see them walk by out in the far away in the field. They were gone. It's as if I lost a special privileged view of the world. And I believe artists possess this same special view. Instead of the evasive coyote, the artists are inspired and driven by the elusive creative soul. I know unique ideals are always present, just beyond our daily routines, obligations, and life distractions. I call this brain space, when my brain's so full of things I can't see anything except for what I'm preoccupied with. And then as it opens up, I start seeing things that I didn't see before. And until we feed our creative soul like the coyote, unique ideas and innovations are not apparent. So, how do we feed our creative soul? How do we feed the coyote? I'll briefly describe 5 ways to feed the coyote. And the first is to decide to be. Announce, I am an artist. Second, be courageous. Find those moments when it's uncomfortable or even seemingly impossible to be yourself or pursue your passion and do it. Create your own path. Joseph Campbell said, if you can see the path, then it's not your own. And fourth, find Gordon McKenzie's boss. If you get anything from my talk today, get this. Orbiting the Giant Hairball is a book every creative should have on their bookshelf. The late, great Gordon McKenzie wrote about his experience as an artist within the large organization Hallmark. He described how tough it was to maintain a level of creativity and authenticity within the stifling structure of a company. McKenzie describes his journey through Hallmark over a 25-year career. One way he was successful at the company was because of his boss, who recognized his creative genius and the value it brought to the corporate environment. His boss called him in one day and said, Gordon, I want you to be you. No titles, no job description, no daily duties, except to help the company in your own unique way. McKenzie organized his office, settled behind his desk, and just sat there. And he had said at first, a couple people stuck their head in and said, hey, Gordon, what are you doing? And a couple people just came by and sat and hung out. But before long, people were coming, and they were sitting, and they were talking, and they were getting what they needed from him, and they were leaving. And he spent the last 10 years at Hallmark in this position. The question is, who do you know in a leadership position that recognizes the value of art and creativity and courageous enough to support it at that level? Think what that conversation looked like for the CEO to go down to the accountant and say, we're going to keep Gordon around. I want him to have everything that he's always had, but he's not going to have a job title. He's not going to have a position. He's not going to have any obligations or duties. Matter of fact, I have no expectations of him. Make sure he gets his paycheck. That's a tough conversation. We must find these creative advocates and first give them a hug. Second, prove them right for their vision that the artist brings something unique to relationships, organizations, and the conversation. Let me leave you with this thought. People will always tell you that it's unwise, foolish, and even dangerous to feed the coyotes. Those that are courageous or foolish enough to feed the coyotes are the people who will be leading us to places that we've never imagined. And I believe, I've seen, matter of fact, I've even experienced the fact that we all benefit when artists are able to create.